After all those great science talks, I'm going to come in here and completely switch gears and bore everybody with a little bit of legal talk. The talk that I'm going to give today is basically a very broad overview of kind of the patent law with a little bit of practical advice thrown in. I apologize in advance. It's a pretty broad look. It's kind of like a 35,000-foot view of patent law. So I apologize to anybody who has had more exposure to patent law and is sort of bored by this and thinks it's too basic. I also apologize to those who've had no exposure and it goes beyond what you really want to hear at this point. So hopefully there will be 2 to 3 people in here that I actually target exactly right. That's the goal. So first I was going to run through some of the requirements for obtaining a patent. You have to have patentable subject matter, obviously. You have to have written description and enablement in your application. You have to meet what's called the best mode requirement, and your invention has to be novel and non-obvious. So I'll touch on each of these briefly. So with regard to patentable subject matter, it's a pretty broad standard. There's this famous case from 1980, Diamond versus Chakrabarty, that related to genetically engineered bacteria. And in that, the Supreme Court held that patentable subject matter included anything under the sun made by man, which is obviously pretty broad. So that has led to a wide array of things being deemed patentable, including isolated genes and proteins. So you can patent this is the reason you can patent a DNA sequence or a protein sequence is because of this very broad holding. So you can't patent the sequence if it's in someone's body, that sort of thing. It's like a misconception a lot of people have that I think that don't know that much about this. It actually has to be an isolated DNA sequence or an isolated protein. You can also have claims directed to antibodies, transgenic animals and plants, cell lines, small molecules, kits, devices, methods of treatment, assays, basically just a whole array of things. It's actually much easier to look at just the things that you can't actually get a patent for. Most of these don't really come up much in the field of biotech. These are actually much more commonly issues in computers, electrical engineering, that sort of thing. So you can't patent laws of nature. You couldn't patent something relating to how gravity acts on a certain object. Abstract ideas, you can't really patent E equals MC squared. Naturally occurring minerals, wild plants, that sort of thing. And this last one, human organisms, I'll actually mention several times in here. The American Invents Act was passed this last fall, and it's one of the biggest changes to the U.S. patent law in probably 25 or 30 years. One of the things that did was put in a specific provision saying that you can't patent, anything directed to or encompassing a human organism. So it's really broad language. There's actually some question about that because if you interpret that as broadly as possible, directed to could include a lot of different things, a lot of components of the human body, that sort of thing. So people are sort of wondering what this is going to mean. That's actually kind of a common recurring theme for a lot of the American Invents Act is these ideas all sound well and good, but nobody's really sure how they're really going to be implemented. So long story short, you can't patent a person. This is where we jump to a little bit of practical advice. Just because something is patentable subject matter doesn't mean you should file a patent application for it. A lot of times people have the view that you should just file as much as you can, get everything filed and rack up as many patents as possible. That's usually not practical unless you have a virtually unlimited budget for patents. Patents can be very expensive. Just the initial filing and preparation usually costs anywhere from a few $1,000s up to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. There's really no cap on it. It's however much you want to spend and however much data there is to put in there. But they can cost quite a lot of money. And just filing the application really just starts the whole process. You then have a prosecution process that can be pretty expensive. If you want to file overseas, that gets very expensive pretty quickly. So it's good to